Hello guys, welcome back to another Bible series. In today's series, we're going to be looking at the life of Esther. Now, if you haven't watched our previous series, we talked about the life of Joseph and also the life of Jonathan and how they fulfilled purpose and how you can as well. Now, in today's series, we're going to be talking about Esther and how she fulfilled purpose. Now, for many of you that may not know who Esther is, Esther became queen at a certain time where the previous queen, Queen Vashti, was banned. At that time, the king needed a new queen, and Esther was among the women who were invited to the palace for the king to choose. Now, Esther found favor in the sight of the king, and then she became queen. Now, during this time when Esther became queen, she had a cousin called Mordecai. Now, Mordecai had reached out to Esther to let her know that war had, broken out and they were about to kill the Jews. Now, for context, Esther was a Jew as well as Mordecai, but she kept this secret and she didn't let anyone in the palace know. So when the king had made a decree that all the Jews in the region should be killed because of a certain man called Haman who had reached out to the king to tell him to kill the Jews, Mordecai then reached out to Esther to let her know that this was going to happen and there was an order out for her people to be killed. Now, at first, Esther was thinking, okay, there is no way I can go to the front of the king because the king has to call you before you go into the palace. So that was when Mordecai had told her that who knew, maybe she was here in the palace at such a time as this. Now, that was a significant point for Esther because that was when Esther realized the reason and the purpose for her being in the palace. Before then, she probably did not know. But it came to the point where there was a problem and it was Esther that was able to help her people. Now, there was something that Mordecai also said which is significant, and that was the book of Esther chapter 4. You can read the whole story of Esther, the book of Esther, and that chapter 4 verses 13. This was when Mordecai was, replying to Esther. And he said, don't think for a moment that because you are in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. He says, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. So that was Mordecai, telling Esther that this is the reason why you were probably made queen. You were made queen for such a time as this to save your people and to save the Jews. Now, what lessons can we learn from the story from the life of Esther and how she fulfilled her purpose? Number one is that Esther was very brave. She was fearless because after Mordecai had spoken to her, she then said, okay, fine. What I want you all to do is to fast and pray with me for 3 days. And she said, if I must die, I die. So she was fearless and she was brave. She knew that she had a purpose and a calling, and she was brave enough to follow through. The second lesson we can learn from the life of Esther is that Esther required help from God. She did not go ahead to try to solve the problem herself. She knew that this was a purpose that God had called her into, and it was only God that could help her fulfill this purpose. So she decided to fast and to pray. And when she did that, God had given her directions on how to go about the matter. So the way she was able to come to the king and the way she was able to get deliverance for the Jews was through the leading of God. Now, the third thing that we can learn from the life of Esther is that she was obedient. So all through Mordecai had told her, Esther, do not let anyone know that you are a Jew. Because if perhaps the Haman who wanted to kill the Jews had knew that Esther was a Jew, he would have poisoned the king's mind against Esther. But because she obeyed Mordecai and she kept the secret that she was a Jew, she was then able to help her people when it was time for them to need that help. Now, the first lesson we can learn from the life of Esther is that Esther recognized her purpose and she did not back out. Now, like I said earlier, she was fearless, but she could have also decided and said, okay, you know what, I've tried my best. I can't do it anymore. But she was persistent. She knew that she had a purpose and a calling upon her life. So she made sure that she followed through. She recognized her purpose and she stuck to the end. Now, the fifth lesson we can learn as well is that Esther listened to the counsel of those around her. Now, she listened to the counsel of Mordecai. When Mordecai had reached out to her for help, she did not say, okay, now I'm in the palace, you guys are on your own, I'm in the palace, nothing will happen to me. But she obeyed the counsel of Mordecai. So it's important for you you to recognize the people around you who can help you to fulfill your purpose, because God will definitely send people to you to help you fulfill your purpose and the assignment He has called you to do. So it's important for you to recognize those people and also to heed to their counsel. So I hope you've learned a few things from the story of Esther, and I hope you understand that everybody in this life has a purpose and a calling for their lives. You didn't just come into the world by mistake. You were sent here for a purpose. If you don't know what God's purpose for your life is, then go back to God and ask Him to show you, why are you here? Why has He brought you here? Because He has brought you here for a purpose and for a calling. Esther recognized that, Joseph recognized that, Jonathan recognized that, and the other people we're going to be talking about in the series, you would also see how they recognize their purpose and fulfilled God's purpose for their lives. So I hope you've learned something from today's series, and we will see you next Monday for another Bible series of another Bible character that fulfilled purpose. Till next time, bye.